I'm Hap Daus. I'm one of the volunteers in the museum. I'm a photographer of a long time, and I've always been interested in the photography section of the collection here that Rollo Jamison had. So we're going to go through some of what's here, and we'll talk about that and show you some different things and why these cameras were used and what cameras have transitioned to today. A very important person started the collection of everything that's in this museum, Rollo Jamison. He thought by having all of the stuff that he could find, he created a collection especially for youngsters, so they could see eventually what had happened with the world before they came along. As you see with this camera, you don't see one of these cameras very often anymore. They're still used in some places, but this is, like from the 1850s. It was used for portraits. One of the things that happened especially in the countryside, was a photographer would have a smaller view camera, similar to this but much smaller, and he would go around in a horse and a buggy and take photos of families on the farm, those people who couldn't get to town all the time, and that was quite a flourishing business, especially through the upper Midwest and the Plains states. So a photographer could make a living just traveling around shooting families. And it shot negatives that were huge. It shot negatives that were 11 by 14, most of this page, or 8 by 10. As time went on, we started shooting smaller and smaller negatives. The negative is what carried the information to create the picture. This is a 4 by 5, and that was used through the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s to shoot a lot of stuff, black and white. And then got a little bit smaller. Then 35 millimeter was a camera that's used for many, many years. Everybody, his brother and son and Uncle Joe had when to shoot the weddings and everything else. That was a fairly small image. Then now, with digital equipment, we're dealing with a pickup chip that is this size down here, but it doesn't carry nearly as much information as the larger format negatives did. This is what we use today. It's got a pickup on here that's about the size of a 35 millimeter negative, which is, as you saw on there, 35 millimeters is a lot smaller than 11 by 14. The joy of using a camera today is that I can put several different lenses on that camera for different purposes, for close-ups, for looking at things far away, and looking at things very, very close. Whereas this camera here, and cameras like it, called a view camera, had a lens that was like this, and that one there is huge. It was made for shooting inside a studio. Tischer Photography here in town used one that he had gotten from his predecessor in that studio, and up until probably 20 years ago, didn't use very often, but it was a table camera that shot very nicely. But this camera, when it was first used, did not have a negative like we know it, not just a piece of plastic. What the negative was a glass plate, and it was a colloidal solution put on there, and as long as that solution was wet, it was light sensitive. You would put the solution on there, stick it in the back of the camera, have everybody get ready and take a picture of it. But sometimes those photos took minutes to expose. This camera, its shutter was actually the lens cap. You say, okay, everybody hold still, pull the lens cap off, hold it out here somewhere, expose the negative, and put it back on. And that may have taken 2 or 3 minutes. So having a chair, like you see back here, you had to have something comfortable so people would not move. And it was a whole different process. It was the beginning of photography, although I've seen pictures of John Adams, one of our early presidents, taken in black and white film. So it was used back earlier than the 1850s. Let's look at what we have here in the Mining and Rollo Jamison Museum. It's a nice collection of cameras and prints. We have tin types. Tin types was a piece of tin that was cut out of whatever, tin something, and the colloidal solution was put on there, put into a camera back similar to this, and shot directly onto the tintype. There was no negatives, there was no reproducing them. That was what you got, is a little tintype. Women would stick them in their purse, or they would hang them on the wall or put them on the mantle. It wasn't something you normally carried, because I know, it was a piece of tin, it didn't fit in your pocket well, and it hurt when you bent over. So you didn't want to use that much. When you come into the museum itself, there's so many different cameras here. There's a progression of cameras. One of the earliest consumer cameras is a box camera. It's a box with a shutter on it. And it used roll film like this, which had anywhere from 6 to 12 exposures on it. And it was fairly slow in letting light in. So it was, you had to hold still. Everybody, okay, hold still, take a picture now. And you'd have to, everybody would, don't move, don't sneeze, don't blink your eyes. And it would took millions and millions of pictures, these box cameras like this, quite well used all over the place. It was a good substitute for this camera. These cameras, for the most part, except for the two out there, couldn't do what this camera does. This camera, all these boards on here move back and forth. If you're taking a picture of a building with columns, well, let's say you're going to take a picture of the Sears building in Chicago. With a camera today, you shoot and you see, whoa, the thing's going to a point at the top. Well, the swings and tilts, the movement of the board here with the lens would let you correct that, so it would make it go straight up and down instead of converging at the top. And there's special lenses that you can get today to do that with your camera. So these were very adaptable, used for a lot of things, both indoors and outdoors, but this is an indoor camera. These are consumer cameras, and there's bellows on there, quite like that. And this could do the same thing. By moving the lens board, you can correct for the converging lines at the top of a tall building. And it shot a negative, again, like this. This was used a lot. But the images on here were very good because they were like 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 inches, or 2 1/4 inches by 2 1/4 inches. And that size, you could fit a lot of photographic information on there. So when you printed it, it came out very nicely. It could use, anybody could use them. They used a short period of time to expose for who you're shooting. So it made them very popular. You didn't have to sit for 3 minutes and not twitch. Don't bat your eyelashes or anything like that. So it worked much better. And they became, and then there was also, this was more of a press camera. It was you could shoot 2 negatives. You would put this film back in here with 2 negatives in there, push it in, pull out the dark slide so you could get light through the lens, and take a picture, put the dark slide back in, turn it around, and use the second exposure in there. So it was a 2 exposure camera. But again, I was using faster and faster film. By fast, I mean you didn't need as much light to expose it as you did with this camera. Most of the film that was shot on these cameras was also called ortho film. It was either red, blue, or green insensitive, which made a difference in what the subject of the portrait of the person looked like. Let's say you had an old guy that wanted his portrait taken, and his face was wrinkly and craggy and all kinds of stuff like that, with tons of character in it. But he also had you could see his red veins and stuff through his face. Well, he used the red insensitive film, and the face would come out more quote unquote normal, and get rid of some of the blemishes and stuff in there. So, and later on, those films were used for natural resource assessment in air photos and stuff, depending upon what they wanted to emphasize wherever they were shooting. Now, we've gone through just about everything that Rollo Jamison has in the collection here, which is much better if you come and see it in person. Would love to have you.